I don't think we had any idea how big it was going to be, but you kind of knew from the very beginning that something was happening.
I just got caught up in it. It's just so exciting being here, all the things that were happening.
We were kind of starting to feel like we were doing something that was really counting.
We had like 20-foot ceilings. We had like records stacked to the ceiling.
We could not ship the records out fast enough, it seemed like, you know.
We were just blowing up.
What good day for?
You know, when I first started the label, I really had a very simple mission, and that was, I want to create a label that keeps their bands happy. In the 80s, when I started this label, basically, if you were a band, you hated your label. It just, you know, even the indies back then used to rip off their bands. So, I mean, you know, I'm coming at this from the point of view of an artist, because, you know, I started out in a garage band. I didn't start out as a businessman. So, I guess maybe that's where I got my perspective. And I thought, okay, you know, I'm going to start a label that an artist can be comfortable with.
I've always had the philosophy that nobody knows a band's audience better than the band. And we can sit here and we can, you know, we can have these brainstorming sessions and try to guess what it's all about. But these are people that are up in front of that crowd every single night doing their thing. They know what's going on. They know what their crowds are responding to. So we always take very seriously, you know, the band's input of who it is that's listening to them, what their audience is like.
We definitely have like more of a family relationship with our bands than I would guess many, if not most, other labels have.
Our bands get to do what they want to do, for the most part.
Epitaph's just really good and clean and honest, and they had, you know, a roster of devoted touring bands on a regular basis and created a consistent grassroots fan base.
I think the first 5 bands or 6 bands signed all turned into be really great bands.
Everyone had a passion for this, you know, and I think that's what made a difference.
Oh yeah, I mean, in the old days, yeah, you know, artists would come in and make phone calls or whatever, help us stuff envelopes, and you know, at the same time, in the old days, you had the president of the record company pushing the buttons of the sound console. So it was all very, very much like a family.
I felt like I was part of something like the whole time. Since I've been into punk rock, since I heard my first songs that got me hooked and stuff, and just being on Epitaph, I mean, I felt like I was where I belonged in the punk rock scene.
Labels are the enemy, generally.
We're the label, you're the artist, and you work for us. That's always been the model, and we just looked at it and we just flipped it. And we said, hey, you're the artist, and we're the record company, and let us work for you. And as long as we look at it that way, we can't possibly make a wrong decision.
Nobody has ever really told us how to do this. So we kind of get to make it up as we go along and figure things out on our own. And I know that we do a lot of things different than the majors do, but I think better.
We're an indie label. I mean, we started out of the back of a car, you know, figuratively speaking. We started out of a closet, I guess you could say. LA in the early punk days was the exact opposite of how it is nowadays. There were hardly any bands, and all these kids super interested in punk rock. Now you've got 10 million bands and 10 million labels and a finite number of kids to experience them all. It was kind of part of the punk rock scene and part of the punk rock culture to put out your own 7-inch. And the punk rock record stores that existed really had a lot of loyal customers. And you know, we'd bring them a box of records on consignment, and we'd come back next week and they'd sold half of them. We'd come back 2 weeks later, they'd sold all of them. Then we'd give them another box. Back then, Epitaph was just a name, and we had to have a name to put on our 7-inch. You know, your 7-inch has to be on some label, right? So, you know, me and Greg were both really into King Crimson when we were kids. There's, you know, on one of the records, I think it's The Court of the Crimson King, and there's a song on that record, I forgot the title of the song, but the lyric in the song says, "Confusion shall be my epitaph." And there's a big echo on the word, and it's cool. And we were just rocking out to that song and hanging out at band rehearsal and thinking what we would call the label if we made a 7-inch. Epitaph. And that's where it comes from, you know. Me and Greg geeking out listening to prog. I don't know if it's a good name or not. I mean, everyone says, hey, what does the name mean? Wow, it's, you know, wow, it's like the words on your gravestone, man. Like, you know, after you die, your music will be left behind, you know, which is true, you know, but I mean, we just never really put that much thought into it. It wasn't really, you know, it was just like, oh, that's a cool word. Those are the words on your grave, cool, you know. It's just like, you know, it's just very teenage, you know. It's just like, that's punk. Someone explained to me, hey, you don't need to drive around every record store in LA. You can sell to something called a distributor. And they will take, you know, not just, you know, 5 or 10, they'll take boxes from you. And they will pay you for those boxes. And I was like, really? I can remember the day. I went to, the first distributor I ever sold to was this place called Gem. And I went up to a guy, I remember his name, Bobb. He's like, yeah, we love Bad Religion. We'll buy some from you. Said, okay, cool. What do you pay for them? What should I sell them for? He's like, well, you know, like $4 a record. This is before CDs, you know. Like, okay, how many do you want? Like, I'll take 2,000. Like, what? Yeah, I'll take, you know, 2,000 and pay you $4 each. Like, that's $8,000. Okay. I couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. I was like, oh my God. The second release we ever did was the Vandals, Peace Through Vandalism. It was the Vandals' first record. It was produced by Tom Wilson. Then we did our little side excursion called Into the Unknown, which was another Bad Religion record, which is good luck finding it nowadays. To give official numbers, we shipped 10,000. I think we had 11,000 returns. I don't know how that happens. But that basically quelled my enthusiasm for Epitaph for a little while. We just had a huge flop. And it wasn't like, you know, I had a lot of money or anything, and so I couldn't really afford to have a huge flop. So I kind of said, all right, maybe I'm not cut out for this after all. So there was a period of activity where Epitaph wasn't really going. But you know, the records we had made were still out, you know, but there just wasn't anything new being made. No. In that interim, I had a bunch of different gigs. I worked at a record distributor. I worked at Bobb. I worked at a couple different recording studios because I had gone to school for that, and I liked it. So what I did next was I started West Beach Recorders with my buddy John Girdler. I had a few bucks, and he had a few bucks. We put them together. We bought some crappy equipment, put it in this little space that we rented from this other studio. So we were like in the back closet of this other studio. And we kind of set up West Beach, and that was West Beach's first location. Me and John split up, and John got bought out by a guy named Donnell Cameron, who's my partner to this day in West Beach.
Yeah, it wasn't a very unlikely meeting. Here was this kind of square-looking guy, older guy from Canada, next to this kind of punk rock California guy from Woodland Hills. And, you know, I came to LA to go to engineering school, and after I got out of engineering school, Pat told me about a guy who had a little studio who needed some help.
Me and Don were working real hard at West Beach, and we were putting in, I'd give you an idea what West Beach Recorders was like. We charged $15 an hour for 24-track analog recording studio, and that included us as the engineers. After paying the studio costs and all that, me and Don were probably working for about $2 an hour. And, you know, but working so many hours that we could pay our rent and put food on the table. But it was really hard. And so I thought, okay, I'm not making any forward progress here. How am I going to ever make any money? One time I had some success, you know, as a record label, a long time ago. Maybe I should try that, and I could do it out of the back of West Beach. And me and Donnell took West Beach and moved it to this place in Hollywood, a street called Vista Del Mar. West Beach had a little office with a closet, and that became Epitaph.
And they're running an office, the lounge, and the studio out of one like tiny little house.
This guy had this little wood desk with a phone with like a little mini tape answering machine, and that was Epitaph. And then I had like a broom closet that I had some like boxes of vinyl, and that was it. You know, that was our place.
And we went to West Beach just because Brett was in Bad Religion and he was recording bands. And since Bad Religion were our favorite punk band, we met him and he was pretty cool.
NoFX recorded Liberal Animation, S&M Airlines, Ribbed. Bad Religion recorded Suffer and No Control, Against the Grain there.
NoFX had just finished their album, Down by Law, was doing an album, and we had our first, real recording experience with Brett and Donald, and it was pretty much hell.
We fought so much in the studio. We were yelling at each other, and this is absolutely true. Brett quit that record twice. He walked out of the studio and left and didn't come back till the next day. It was pretty gnarly.
Brett got really mad at me, threw me out of the studio about 15 times, and then took his name off the album because he hated it. Only the way it sounded. He loved the album, just hated the way it sounded, and he said it was my fault, which it was.
It's been a lot of fun working on the records, and I've got to see the bands, grow up, go from being like punk rock kids, and now they're like adults with lives, and it's just been great to be involved in the process.
Then Bad Religion came, and they said, and they had still been going for the last few years, but without me, and Hetson was playing guitar instead of me. So anyway, Bad Religion had a gig at Gilman Street. Greg Hetson couldn't go because he was on tour with the Circle Jerks. Greg called me up and said, "Hey Brett, come on, just come play the show. We have the show. It's gonna be fun. It's at Gilman Street." And I said, "No way. I don't remember the songs. But, I don't know. Come on, And they're like, "Oh, come on. We got the van. We're going up there." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll try it." So I went up there, and it was super fun. And Gilman just, went off. We all decided to write some new songs. And after like 7 rehearsals, we had the Suffer record written. That was kind of when Epitaph really got started up for real. The first record actually was L7. It was before the Suffer album. Suffer did very well, and L7 actually did quite well. The next group I signed after that was NoFX. And then the next group I signed after that was Pennywise. And then I think Down by Law, and then I think Rancid. So, all boom, boom, boom right in a row. And it seemed like every group I signed did very well. Oh, and actually before I signed Rancid, I signed The Offspring, So I was just like, I was on what you might call a roll.
I was working at Epitaph one afternoon, and someone knocked on the door, and I went and answered the door, and it was Jeff Abarta. And he was very funny looking. He had a suit and tie on.
Mike opens the door, and I'm just like, okay, I'm a geek.
This guy comes in, and I might be remembering this wrong, but I think he had like a button-down shirt and a tie.
And it was a skinny new wave tie. And we were like, who is this Yahoo?
And he looked really square, right? And this is this young kid, really clean cut.
And I think he had a Save-On. "Hi, my name is Jeff. I work at Save-On too."
And he's like, "Hi, was this Epitaph?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, I'm here to apply for a job. I'd like to work at Epitaph." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, I've never hired anybody before, and I'm not sure if I can pay you anything because I don't make enough to pay an employee, And he goes, "I don't care. I'll work for free." And I'm like, "Well, okay. You're hired. I can't turn that down."
I had gone from working at Save-On, where you get these nice printed checks that have your tax deductions, to having this guy with purple hair handwriting me a check, every, couple weeks or whenever he sort of got around to it.
And I said to Jeff, "All right, I'm leaving the company with you because I have to go on tour, so it's just you." And he's like, "Okay, what do I do?" I said, "All right, well, just sit here all day. And if the phone rings, if it's a distributor, here's how you fill out an invoice, and here's how you call the trucking company, and just ship it to them. And that's pretty much all you have to do. And if someone else calls, just take a note." Yeah, this is before cell phones. We are ancient people here. He could not call me in Europe, okay? It was like, "I'm going." And he just would come to work every day, and he would just, basically, he would play hockey. He'd hit a hockey ball against the wall with his hockey stick for 8 hours and then go home.
Those are the days, man.
Now, Fat Mike says he remembers he worked for me down in that place, too.
I worked there for 2 weeks. No, maybe a month. I don't know.
And I'm not sure. Maybe Jeff remembers it. If that remembers it, I don't remember that.
I was starting Fat Records at the same time, so worked there a couple weeks, get some insider information. See?
But Mike wouldn't lie, so I'm sure it's true.
This is what I remember about working there. Is there was only 3 records on Epitaph. There was Bad Religion, Suffer, Bad Religion, No Control, and No Effects, S&M Airlines. And this is how I'd ship the orders. The invoices would come in, be 100 Suffer, 100 Bad Religion, No Control, nothing for No Effects. The next one, 150 Suffer, 150 No Control, 5 No Effects. And one day I remember I shipped out about 10,000 Bad Religion CDs and about 150 No Effects. Good memory.
94 is when the Unknown Road record hit that 100,000 threshold.
So obviously it was caused for celebration.
We threw a party over at the Frolic across the street.
And we had it was a little Mexican bar.
Bob's Frolic Room 3.
Okay, so it was Bob's Frolic Room. That tells you how f***ed up I was.
Frolic Room 1 in Hollywood, Frolic Room 2, I don't know where it is. Number 3 opened up right across the street from us.
And we had a big party for Pennywise, which I'm sure you'll hear other stories about.
All of us there at Epitaph showed up there, early. Started drinking. Big cake for Pennywise. By like mid-evening, 10 o'clock, something like that, we're all really smashed. Fletcher's really smashed, and I walk up and he's sitting there and he's lighting matches with his teeth and flicking them out. And I walk up to Fletcher and I'm like, hey, how do you do that? I'm really drunk. And he goes like this. When he flicks the match, and as it's sparking up, douses it right into my face. Just like entered it right into my face. And then I proceeded to try to punch him, and I was carried out by all my friends.
I got out of there. Yeah, I saw shit going down, so I was just like, ooh, I gotta go. It's time to go home now. See ya.
I left. And Fletcher felt really bad about it, and my friend Jimmy goes back in and told him he's an asshole, and Fletcher, and told him, Fletcher, he shouldn't have done that. Fletcher proceeded to just cause complete mayhem.
That night pretty much got pretty ugly. There was some broken stuff and some reporters that got worked over a little bit, some journalists. I remember I nailed Andy right in the eyes with a Cadillac margarita.
I knew that, it could get ugly, so, I had to leave.
I think I ended up at Small's Bar with Jimmy, right?
Jimmy Hole, yeah.
Jimmy Hole.
Yeah.
Giving him a lecture on why it was okay for me to burn John Wahl in the face with an Ohio blue tip.
Wound up at another bar with Jimmy, loaded up a pile of matches on his arm and lit it on the bar. He still has a big old scar from that. And then he wound up later on that night inside of a tree with a bunch of cops with flashlights and guns.
Oh, actually, yeah, you know what? I actually wound up in jail that night. Yeah, well, like what happened was the bartender didn't like the lecture I was given with the flaming book of matches coming off my arm, and he didn't even wait. He just called the cops, and he told me the cops were coming for me, so I thought, well, I'm fucking out of here anyways, so I climbed up on the roof of Smalls, and I was hiding up there. I could see the police helicopter coming in, but it was so far away, I'm like, there's no way he'd see me. So I got under this tree on the roof. And then I was remembering an episode of Cops where they have the infrared detectors, because he was just hovering on me at the spotlight. And I'm like, how the fuck did that guy see me? So the infrared detectors got me. There was like 3 fire trucks, 2 paramedics, 15 cop cars around the whole block. And then they took me to jail. Got bailed out like 10 in the morning. We had to leave. No, I got bailed out like 7 in the morning. And just threw up the whole way home, out the car window, in rush hour traffic.
Fletcher getting smashed can be a very scary thing.
He's got no scar. I got like a scar the size of something big.
I forgave him the next day. It was incredibly funny, because as he's flicking the matches at me after he'd done that to me, he's like going, "Call Hammer."
He won. I lost. But it was good.
That changed my life. 94.
Yeah, 94. '94 was a good year for Epitaph, man.
That year was insane.
We just blew up at that time, you know? The phones wouldn't stop ringing. The record, we could not ship the records out fast enough, it seemed like, you know? It was crazy, crazy times.
That year we had the Offspring smash, Rancid, Out Come the Wolves. And then, although Bad Religion left Epitaph, that's the year they did Stranger Than Fiction. Elsewhere, you know, Green Day did Dookie. That was the year that punk rock showed up on the mainstream radar.
It was all about, you know, we had conquered the system. We had been playing, I've been playing in punk bands since 1980, 81, and doing what everyone told me was wrong, you know.
I never thought we were going to have a hit record. I never thought that we'd have a platinum record. I never even thought we'd have a gold record. When The Offspring finished their Smash CD, I loved it. I thought Come Out and Play was an amazing song. I wanted to send it to radio.
We were listening to the record, and Brett was saying, yeah, this is a hit song, you know, this is the hit, you know, Come Out and Play. And we were just like, hit song, you know, what's that? Like, I mean, are you kidding us? Like, you're gonna put punk rock on the radio and it's gonna be a hit song? Like, come on. And Offspring was the same way. They were like, I don't know what he's talking about, radio, you know, and boom, next thing you know, it was over.
The song had already been picked up by K-Rock and was already kind of caught on fire by the time we shot a video.
Yeah, it was really exciting from the very beginning. Before the record was even out, we were really excited about the record.
I remember Maximum Rock and Roll, the Bible of punk rock, calling it the punk record of the year.
I guess that's when everything, you know, really changed.
It was just...
You gotta keep them separated.
Pallets jammed in our warehouse, the phones ringing like crazy, fax orders coming in like crazy.
All of a sudden you hear the fax machine go off, and Brett and Jeff and Jay would go like, orders! Orders! All excited.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, you know, sitting with Brett and thinking, man, maybe this thing might sell. This might actually sell 500,000.
9 million worldwide, I think is what it's at.
The kind of numbers that we ended up selling on those few records in '94 was shocking to me.
I believe it is still the biggest selling independent record of all time.
You know, people, all of a sudden, everybody knew what Epitaph was. And you talk to anybody and tell them you work at Epitaph and they know what you're talking about.
I just remember Brett was just overwhelmed. He was like getting offers by every major label.
Yeah, I mean, I was very overwhelmed back then. You know, really, you know, felt like my head was spinning.
You just walk out from the office at the old location, sit down in a chair in the middle of the room, and with a dazed look in his face. What's up, Brett? Oh, I've just had 3 new offers for millions.
We were given offers from all the major labels to joint venture with them or partner up with them, and so it would be as a help to us, because we might not have the infrastructure to pull it off, or we might not have the financial resources, or we might just not have the know-how. And hey, we'll come in and we'll give you, X million dollars and let us be your partner, okay?
He made some serious business decisions that were very scary at the moment. They could have been, pass or fail.
Whether I was being smart or being arrogant or being crazy, I don't know. But I decided not to do any of those deals and just to stay independent and try to do it myself.
And they were all calling us, they couldn't say that we couldn't do it. They wanted to buy him out. He said no. But the problem is, to make those records, it costs money. What if we made the records and they didn't sell? It became a very big concern for Brett. He had to basically put his ass on the line.
Brett risked all his money to push Rancid and the Offspring.
I mean, Brett mortgaged his house to be able to make CDs.
And he took a big chance. He could have gone broke. If this record wouldn't have done anything, if it was stopped, we would have been screwed. The Epitaph wouldn't be here today, and Brett would have been broke.
And even on just a very practical, physical level, we didn't have anywhere to put all the records. We had Offspring and Rancid records stacked to the ceiling.
You walked between mountains and mountains of pallets of CDs from the front of the old warehouse to the very back, lined up. Just like hundreds of thousands of CDs showed up.
you couldn't walk. You'd walk into the office in the warehouse and be like,
and then the whole driveway was just jammed with pallets. And then they would go out the door and around the corner sometimes. I mean, so we had to have someone outside all the time because it was such a shitty neighborhood.
and then we had to rent some more warehouses downtown, and the records were filled to the ceiling in those places. And then the thing started selling so fast that we couldn't even put them in the warehouse. We started just shipping truckloads of them from the pressing plant right to the record stores.
It was mind-boggling, and we did it. And when most of that shit was going down, we weren't in this building. We were in this little tiny garage over on Santa Monica Boulevard.
Kind of a gnarly crime-ridden area. A lot of transvestites and people with guns.
It was pretty cheap because it was just like a warehouse, kind of like a big garage.
This is the old Epitaph on Santa Monica Boulevard, and it's a studio rental place now. We built these walls here. This was just an empty space when we first moved in here. This was Brett's office back in the day, and after a while, we moved the accountant into there, and then Brett's desk moved out here. So Brett's desk was here. I've got actually a picture of me and Brett standing right about here. And this whole area was jammed with CDs. I mean, we had a little mailing table here with a little meter and everything, and then everything else was just jammed with CDs. All the way back here, that back wall wasn't there. It was about twice as long. And here, look, there's a little remnant here left. A clawhammer sticker, there's an Epitaph sticker over there. It's just like a little bookshelf right there, and that's where we kept all our promos, that was it.
Things started getting taken a little more seriously. You know, they had a forklift back there, and you know, stuff was getting stacked up on pallets now, and it was like, wow, what's going on here?
I remember the day the forklift blew up under me. I thought somebody had taken a shot at me because there was smoke and a big loud bang. The battery, like one of the cells, just exploded right underneath my ass as I was driving on Santa Monica Boulevard. In the middle of rush hour, we'd be like just pulling out in this big, extremely busy street. Cars were just jamming up traffic forever, loading up all the NoFX and Pennywise and Offspring records on these big bobtail trucks, and loading up long lines of pallets of like stacked one on top of each other out on Santa Monica Boulevard, and sitting on top and drinking 40 ounces of beer, waiting for the trucks to show up. That was one of my flight memories.
Oh, what a day. Yeah, those are good times.
Working the warehouse back then, shipped out the first couple million, was it? Pretty much first million out of that place.
I mean, he personally ships most of those records himself. And Rhonda was doing the production thing by herself. It was always by herself. I was here till 11 o'clock every night. We didn't even have a radio person. I was quarterbacking the radio thing until about halfway through the project, and we started hiring radio people. I mean, we were a small little company and all this stuff was happening.
A lot of people thought we were a huge company at that time too, because the Offspring was so big and was doing so well. People were kind of surprised when they found out we had like 10 employees at that point.
You know, we all quit our jobs. We're in a band, you know, we're doing what we love for a living, and waking up in the morning and not having to go punch a time clock, you know. It was pretty much pretty amazing.
We witnessed something that no one can take away from us, you know. Just, it was special, you know, to be a part of that. It was really cool.
The explosion of these punk records in '94, and the fact that Epitaph remained indie, just had a nice positive effect on the independent music scene in all its different aspects. You know, from the mom and pop store to the mom and pop indie distributor to the fanzine to the, you know, it pumped vitality. It pumped vibrancy into the whole scene, and it was really alive. And it was really flying high there for all the mid-'90s, you know. And it was just a nice feeling. It was a nice feeling to play a part and to contribute to that.
And, you know, you see that being followed up with Punk and Drublic by NoFX. You know, arguably one of the finest records ever of the genre. I feel like, you know, they were inspired by seeing that happen. About Time by Pennywise. Out Come the Wolves by Rancid. These are like the core must-have records that all came out in the wake of this. Excitement and the possibility of what could happen.
It happened for The Offspring, then it happened, you know, and it happened for Green Day, then it happened for Rancid. Then my own group, Bad Religion, even had a gold record.
So many people told us we couldn't do it. We decided to give them all a thank you.
Brett took out an ad in, was it Billboard?
Full-page ad for Billboard magazine with all of us flipping off the camera.
Giving the finger. It was a full-page ad and it said, "To whom it may concern," you know?
And it wasn't just labels, it was just everybody. You know, everybody's saying you're not going to be able to do this.
For all you people that thought we couldn't do it, that's pretty fucking rad.
And it's also, even before this happened, all those years of people telling us, you know, you're an independent label, you're only going to be able to do this much. And that's just the way it is.
Brett's belief in the scene and punk rock and, you know, his label, you know, he proved everybody wrong.
You know, Brett's he's such an amazing boss. He's such a genuine, honest guy that I knew early on that I was going to make a career out of Epitaph. Not just, you know, record industry aside, I just, you know, I wanted to work for Brett, and so here I am.
I was afraid of Brett for the first couple months, just because I hadn't really talked to him that much, and I was awed by Brett. I thought he was brilliant.
The fact that he believed in it, you know, and believed in the music and believed in what he was doing, and just like the guy's drive was just incredible. He had so much energy, it would just pour out all the other employees, the bands. He would get them so hyped up that it was like, you know, you had no choice but to, you know, make it happen.
He became more of a man of the world, you know, the bigger it got, he needed to be, you know, get out there and represent. But he's still Brett, you know, go to his house and hang out, and he's goofy and he's incredibly funny.
He's the smartest guy I know. I mean, he is brilliant, and I would never take him or this company for granted just because there's pretty much nothing else I'd rather be doing.
Very proud of my track record. Signed a lot of great bands. It doesn't feel like I've done that much. Yes, I've been able to recognize good bands, but I think, you know, a big part of it was after signing the first few bands that were great, that was attractive to other bands. So the other bands wanted to be associated with them, and they came to me, and so I can't take too much credit for it. I'm grateful, I'm lucky, you know, but the real truth is that's just all bullshit, false humility. I'm the greatest. I found those bands and I made them what they are. Today. And they would be nothing without me. And in fact, they're not even real bands. I wrote all their songs for them. And I sing. Fat Mike never sang a note in his life. That's me lip syncing behind the curtain.
We have an album. It says on the plaque, "This is congratulating NoFX for selling way the fuck under 500,000 records." He gives a half gold record, chopped in half. That's special.
This is what Epitaph looks like today. We've got our headquarters, our worldwide headquarters here in Silver Lake. We have about 35 people here. We have a small warehouse. It's about 5 minutes away. One guy mans the whole warehouse. Our European headquarters is in Amsterdam, and we have about maybe about 20, 25 people there. They act as a central hub in Europe, and they also have a warehouse out of which they ship to each country in Europe. In Australia, we have one guy who works for us, represents us over there. We have one really talented woman who works for us in Canada. We have a licensing deal in Japan. We have a blues label called Fat Possum, and they're based in Oxford, Mississippi. We're partners with them, and we do a lot of work for them out of here and out of our European office. We have a new label called Anti, and that's for all the stuff that we put out that we don't consider to be punk rock, but so that doesn't fit in the Epitaph label. Then we have a partnership with a Swedish punk label called Burning Heart, and in the U.S. we represent them, and in Europe we help them out with various things like distribution and so forth. We have, I guess, what you could call a little family of labels. We're not just one label anymore, and there's a little more diversity. Oh, and last but not least, Hellcat Records. How could I forget that? And that's my partnership with Tim Armstrong of Rancid, one of my oldest friends in the music business, and we see eye to eye on a lot of things, including music. And that's the whole burrito.
I don't think there's another label out there like this label.
I've told almost everybody who works at Epitaph, I said, you know, and it's a trick question, I'll say, do you know who your boss is? And they'll say, yeah, you're the boss. No, the bands are the boss. You don't work for me, you work for them. And if they're not here, you don't have a job. I could be gone tomorrow, chances are you still have a job around here. While the bands walk out the door, what do you think you're doing for a living?
Most record labels suck. They have no interest in the bands, they have interest in making money. And I think that's why Epitaph's been successful for so long. Care about the bands.
You know, because record companies don't make records. You know, bands make records. A record company needs an extra ingredient to make records. They need an artist to write the music and go make the record. Knowing that, and then taking the simple principle of, you know what, we work for the band, they hire us to help them sell some records. It keeps it all very clear, keeps it all in perspective, and by and large, the vast majority of our bands are, you know, pretty happy.
We stay with Epitaph for, you know, they're a good label and they've always treated us fairly, and loyalty, you know. No one has any loyalty anymore. That's what it's about.
Everyone that worked here is into punk rock. It's not like they just went to get a job.
And they hire very, very sharp, keen-minded, and creative people here, like Andy Kaulkin.
I think we're one of the few labels that really is tied into the music culturally. And I also think that, you know, because of Brett, you know, because he was in Bad Religion, you know, we have a label that's growing out of a scene that pretty much grew out of Bad Religion. And I also think we have the very best bands in that scene. And I think that, you know, I'm very proud of this. I think we just, you know, I think that we are very much a part of that world.
You know, I mean, I know a lot of the, you know, the punk police, as I call them, think that Epitaph is a major and we're big nowadays, but the truth is that compared to a major label, compared to someone who makes breakfast cereal, you know, I'm a pipsqueak.
I love the fact that we're putting out great records. I love the fact that we're tied into a culture that's passionate.
We survive because of devotion and that, you know, strive to just prove a point.
I don't know, being independent in itself is meaningless. It's just having great bands. It's just having great music.
Why would I go anywhere else? Why would I, you know? Just wouldn't.
We're going? You say action? Are we growing? There we go.
I did school, I smoked dust. Nuh-uh, I do what I want. We were actually, we'd wear these fur loincloths. We were like cavemen, we had clubs.
Dan's computer. You talking to me?
Bad Religion, NoFX, Rancid, Pennywise. Down by Law, nah, they didn't. You can't really include them.
Epitaph is really about selling round pieces of plastic. And unfortunately, we have to put something on these round pieces of plastic. Otherwise, people won't buy them. So the cheapest thing we could find was music. And it worked really well.
That just fizzled. Woo!
So if I could find out a way to just sell the plastic with nothing on it, believe me, it would be so much easier. I wouldn't have to deal with all these bands.
Hello? Hello?
Every country in Europe practically, and drink free beer. I think I just got bit by a spider.
What do you say?
They were particularly impressed with the fact that I could. They really liked that, and they still talk about that to this day.
So, you're gonna have fun editing this.
You got people doing what kind of specific jobs?
People come in, smoke crack, have anal sex. I don't know, what's a typical day? Come in, smoke some crack, have some anal sex, I don't know, cuss, drink booze, do some crimes. Then we go usually break for lunch.
Do some crimes.
I don't know what that is.
Do some crimes, go get sushi. Then we come back, do some speedballs,
pop each other's zits. You know, like Jeff will get my back, I'll get his back. We'll like tweak for a while until he pick our face. Interview.
Punch the clock.
I'm sorry, dude. I start losing my focus after a while.
That's all.